But again, I would note such a discussion has only been possible as a result of the world-leading results on both sides of the Tasman to get the virus under control. And I do think that we should both be proud of the efforts that have been made and also, the demonstration of the important Anzac bond between us. On to a bit of Kiwi ingenuity. I've outlined a few innovations to date that are helping to get our economy moving. I want to reflect on one of those in particular, and that is our vital supply chain, our transport sector. New ways of working have ensured our food and goods have been unpacked from ships and aircraft, loaded into trucks and delivered to retailers, as well as kept our exports flowing. At Wellington Centre Point, the teams eliminated face-to-face contact and physical paperwork, and they've adopted digital kiosks, radio comms, automated weigh bridges and virtual planning meetings. We've seen that same kind of adaptability in businesses up and down the country. Just one example is how two particular drivers, Greg and Sam, have willingly changed their hours of work and routines to match the different inter-islander ferry timetables so they can continue to get frozen vegetables and chips from Ashburton to the ferries in Picton. I want to say thanks to Greg and Sam. Necessity breeds innovation, and with social distancing and good hygiene likely, of course, to be with us for a long time to come, I wouldn't be surprised if we keep seeing innovation throughout our alert levels and across the country. Happy to take your questions. Yeah, Ben.
It's kind of take a cold shower potentially on how safe it might be.
Well, look, I think the important message there is that it doesn't take much. And that, I think, reinforces why we continue to share that message of stay the course. We have seen across the ditch very low numbers, and then it can only take one outbreak in one workplace or one environment for you then suddenly to have an uptick. And that is why it is so important we stick with our restrictions. Look, the other takeaway for me, and I say this just generally, regardless, is actually there are a lot of similarities in the way that we have each tried to manage COVID and get on top of it and get back in control. And therefore, there's the same goals for both of us. Neither of us want cases of COVID coming between our countries. Neither of us would want the burden of that. So I think regardless of our future path, we'll be looking for ways to do it safely. That will be top of mind. Yeah, and then I'll come to you, Tony. Yeah.
Prime Minister, was there any pushback from any of the state leaders? Did any of them feel that this push for a trans-Tasman travel bubble is too ambitious because many Australian states still have their state borders closed?
Yeah. And so, again, I do want to respect the fact that the National Cabinet is still meeting, and I do also want to respect the fact that we were meeting within a Cabinet environment. So that means, of course, you'll know that when I'm talking about Cabinet, I'll often speak in very general terms. But again, this is not to get ahead of a decision. There are obviously within Australia still restrictions around domestic travel, and those are ultimately issues for Australia. I think simply the position that I would take on behalf of New Zealand is that when we feel comfortable and confident that we both won't receive cases from Australia, but equally that we won't export them, then that will be the time to move.
Clear on whether or not there would be a quarantine at either border?
The whole purpose of us discussing the possibility of having a bubble of sorts between us, a safe zone of travel, would be so that you wouldn't have to have a quarantine attached. I think everyone would acknowledge that it would be prohibitive. People just wouldn't travel if they had to stay on either side in quarantine for a 2-week period and have to do the same again when you return. But there is still a lot of work to be done before we can progress an idea like that, but it's obviously being floated because of the benefits that it would bring.
Taking into account all of those things that we need to ensure that we weren't further transmitting the virus, what kind of certainty or clarity can you give to New Zealanders in Australia who want to come home and see their families? When will they be able to do that?
Of course, I'd say to New Zealanders in Australia, you can come home, but of course at the moment we are still requiring that quarantine to keep you safe and to keep your family safe. But we're also actively considering what the future looks like for us. Now, I'm very keen, of course, as I've always said, that the advantage we have getting back in control of the virus has been to try and get back to some form of normality. International travel won't feel like that for some time, but if we can find a way to make it work with Australia, then that would give that sense of normality if we can make it work.
Level 2.
Oh, again, for really the alert level framework within New Zealand, of course, for us it's actually more the criteria of what we're seeing on both sides of the ditch with our cases, with our controls and with our border management. Jessica?
Where we would have a trans-Tasman bubble but exclude one of the Australian states, for example.
For me, it actually really comes down to a determination at a state and federal level by Australia. So that's less of, other than, of course, we would have some expectations of when travel resumes or if we're able to establish this kind of bubble, making sure we were doing it safely for us. And so that would mean if we were seeing a cluster of cases or growth in cases or outbreaks, that we would have to look on changing what we were doing and what we were receiving on our side. But ultimately, I still see that as part of the arrangements that need to be made between the states and at a federal level. Yep, sorry.
Just give us any more clarity on time frame?
No, I do want to let that meeting conclude. And of course, at the moment, what we're discussing here is a concept that's been floated for some time, but I do want to allow the meeting to at least draw to a conclusion before we go any further. Okay.
Minister, can you, what is your view on how the applications for compassionate exemptions have been handled, given every single one has been declined for that particular circumstance?
Yeah, look, I would anticipate that Dr. Bloomfield probably has a similar view to me on this matter. The whole point of having the ability to apply for a compassionate exemption was so that we could assess the circumstances. There should be nothing automated about that. We should give genuine consideration for each of those applications because they would only have been made because of dire circumstances. Now, I absolutely appreciate the reason we put that in place was we didn't want double grief. We didn't want a situation where people entered into a risky situation for them and their families, but equally we wanted to give them a chance to ask to see if there was a way it could be managed.
Can you clarify the situation for people wanting to travel within New Zealand rather than coming from overseas and being in quarantine? And is that a lower threshold?
Sorry, what was that?
People have a dying relative in another part of the country.
Yes.
Would there be a lower threshold for allowance to
and
go?
And that's some of the kind of scenarios that, of course, then you would want considered when looking at some applications as to the degree to which it can be conducted safely. You see the conditions for the person who made a case to the court were very, very specific about private residence, private travel. And so really the Ministry of Health are having to weigh up some quite complex situations and making sure they also weigh up keeping other New Zealanders safe as well.